This lesson is on the routing of the communications coming into the office. So foremost, let's make a list of the communications coming into the office that can actually create a confusion and a lowering of the overall revenue of the office and an increase of staff in the front office and confusion between the staff and what have you. So let's take a list. What type of communications come into an office? So let's list them down. The first thing is you have new patients calling in, which is an inbound call. The second one is you have existing patients calling in, asking about insurance forms or changing an appointment or what have you. I need to refill my prescription. What other type of calls come in? Well, you have also vendors that call in. And the vendors that call in during the day can be 1, 2, 3, or more. Ask your front office. Now, as the practice grows, the number of calls that come from different vendors begins to increase. And if I'm on the telephone, as an example, and I'm talking to a new patient and the phone line rings, I have to put that person on hold or somebody else has to pick it up while they're actually handling a patient. And you pick it up and it's a vendor calling in. Well, that becomes problematic. So vendors, multiple vendors, it's another form of communication coming into the office. What's another one? Another one is the lab. If you do any type of prosthetics or what have you, then you're going to have a lab that is going to be calling in to check on cases or ask questions or what have you, and that hits, again, the front office. That can be 1 time a day, 2 times a day, 3, whatever. The next type, let's call them repair people. It could be somebody to repair equipment. It could be the Xerox person. It's another one. Any type of person that is doing communication with your office. It could be your accountant. It could be your marketing person. It could be whoever it happens to be. Start listing down all the people you do business with. They actually will begin to call your business line, which is your patient revenue generating line. That becomes problematic as the organization begins to grow. Just get 2 doctors or 2 hygienists and a doctor or a 3rd hygienist and multiple doctors and a specialist and get between 25, 35, 40 on up new patients per month. And as they start coming in, the traffic in this front office becomes overwhelming and confusing for the front office to actually properly grow the business. This will put an income ceiling on this practice without a question. So let's take these calls. I'm going to give you a real live example of an office that was an analysis of communications about a month ago. This office produces pretty close to $250,000 a month, $320,000 up and down, but right in that range of $250,000 to $325,000 a month. It has 2.5 full-time hygienists. It's got 2 full-time doctors and a half-time doctor, 10 operatories, but this is typical of many offices, whether they're small or large. The smaller ones can have even more of a problem. But nevertheless, let's cover what happened here. Every single call in this office actually has an audio file. It is set up with every single marketing item that has a call track number. So it has an audio file to record it. Every single call in the office is recorded. So you can see every single call that comes in within a week's time, 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, or 4 weeks' time. This is going to be fascinating. The number of calls that came in the month of June of this year was 1,377 phone calls. That's pretty important. Now let's analyze what happened when these calls came in. So these calls, we went through them, and on the audio files, you can see the assignment of every single call as to where they came from. So you can see all the unique callers. These are unique, brand new callers that call in on some marketing campaign, whether it's Google AdWords or direct mail or brochures or neighborhood mailers or existing patients or whatever. You can see all those calls. Interesting, the number of new patients and existing patients that called into this practice of the 1,377 phone calls was 463. So there were 463 existing or new patients that called this office of the 1,377. Well, just do the math on this and take a look at how many other calls came into this office. Now, this is an extreme example, but possibly not. This is many offices. If you record them and you do the analysis, you will find very similar results from office to office. Well, if 1,377 phone calls came in, and 463 of them were new or existing patients, just subtract one from the other. And on the screen, you can see how many actually calls came in that were not new patients or existing patients. Wow. What were they? What were all these calls? Now, these calls are devastating to a front office. Those calls that came in were over 800 phone calls that came in that were from various different organizations, people, some robocalls, but those were the minor portion of it. Who were they? It was the lab. It was the existing vendors that were calling. It was the repairmen. Some of them were staff member, family members. But nevertheless, these calls came in and it hits the front office. So look at this diagram. Imagine all the calls coming in. As you can see, this receptionist or office manager or both of them are pulling their hair out. So what do we do about these calls? So this is a pretty simple resolution. This has been going on since 1982 when I first read the article, but it's been advanced. So I'm going to walk through how do you take these communication channels and route them correctly. So let's take all these 700 to 800 calls that came in that had nothing to do with expanding the business itself, which is the patient phone number. So what we're going to do real simply is the following steps. Number one, you can download this when we're done here. What we're going to do is we're going to establish a letter that goes to all vendors, the lab, any type of organization, the Xerox company, the vendors, the person that walks in your office. It could be a Henry Schein rep, a Patterson rep, or whoever it happens to be, Banco. What are we going to do with them? Well, step number one, we're going to actually get a new phone number called the business phone number, not the patient phone number. That business phone number is a separate line that is set up. And all the consumers that call you for various reasons, whether it's a lab, a vendor, a repairman, a Xerox company, whoever it happens to be, they now call that number. How do you orchestrate that so you can segue or transfer those additional communication lines off your reception and your front office to somewhere else? Well, that's pretty simple. A letter is drafted. Here's a sample letter up on the screen here. And the letter just says, "Dear vendor or lab or whoever it happens to be, we so enjoy our relationship with you. We would love to continue our relationship as it's been long term. However, our dental office has been expanding and the number of phone calls that come in on our patient phone line is affecting the service to our patients." New paragraph. We've established a new phone number for all business calls relating to the office, and that business number is below that you can use in the future. In the future, our receptionist has been informed that if a vendor, lab, or anybody calls our patient phone number, we will take note of it. They will be informed that please contact the business phone number. Here it is. Do not contact this phone number. The letter also says if you continue to call our patient phone number, you will no longer be our vendor or the representative for services of this office. It is critical that you call the business phone number. New paragraph. When you do call the business phone number, you will receive only a recording. And the recording is simply, please leave a message. Leave the message so we can get back to you. We will not employ somebody full-time to answer that phone number. So that being said, you will always get a call within the next 24 hours to answer your questions on whatever you called about, whether it's a repair or supplies that we need or what have you. A staff member will be delegated. You'll know who exactly that person is by name. So this immediately does something for your practice. What does it do? It channels all the communication over to a call recording that you now, at your own discretion, can call back when you have time to do so. It's not hitting the communication channels of your patient line, which devastates the confusion at the front desk. Now, no different for the person that walks in that is a representative of a supplier or a vendor. I'm going to call them solicitors. They walk into an office. Many times they walk in unannounced, without appointments, and they may even walk in and start talking to an assistant, take them into your lab, and you've lost your assistant for 20 minutes. Probably never happened to your office, but it certainly happened in mine. So that being said, that person receives the same letter. The letter says, "Dear Dave," he's your representative. We so enjoy having you as our representative. In the future, the appearance at our office may be done one time a month. It's done on the third Friday of every single month between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock. And when you come in during that time period, the person you may see is Linda. She is our supply clerk. You may not talk to anybody else in the office as they're usually busy. If you need an appointment to see the doctor or the office manager or somebody else, you may request that through Linda. In the same letter, you simply tell the person that is the only time that you may come into our office. It is pre-appointed for you. However you want to do it in your office, you may do it. but having somebody walk in unannounced is complete distraction for the front office and what have you. You've now taken all the communication channels that are inundating this front office and you've channeled them to a new patient call or your patient phone number, and you have a second phone number called your business phone number. On this diagram, as you can see, your business phone number takes all vendors, repair people, Xerox company, whoever else is calling you. It's a long list. It only goes to an answering machine, and it gives you the opportunity to call back when you have time or a staff member has time to do it. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't call any of these at any time you want. You obviously have to talk to your lab to make sure a case is going to show up tomorrow or the next day, or they may have questions. So you have outbound calls, but that's on your dime. It's not on their dime. It's a very different organization structure. So let's take a look at how we can even further expand this analysis. So that removes a lot of communication from the front office. Your office manager and your reception people up front will, quite honestly, they will love you. The office I talked about on the analysis of the 1,377 phone calls, we put this in place. We gave letters to the vendors. We gave emails and text messages to everybody else and said, this is the new phone number. Call this number. You have to train the receptionist so that when a new vendor calls, the vendor is told, I'm sorry, we don't take vendor calls or solicitation calls on this phone number. This is our business number. Please call this number. It goes to answering machine, but they will return your call. Now, all of a sudden, they can route the communication somewhere else, and you can handle it on your own dime. So what else can you do to route communication? Well, that's sort of interesting because you have a phone line that comes in, and as the office grows, it's real simple to take and program your phone very simply to have routing on the phone. So let me give you an example of this. This is all over the country. Small and large businesses do it. You've encountered it yourself. You'll know it the moment I say it. It goes ring-a-ding-ding. In many offices, it says, good morning, ABC Family Dental. Your call is being monitored for quality control purposes. And at that point, it rings through. And the first thing that you can do to route communications is, remember, the inbound calls are new patients or existing patients. So when they call, say, if you're a new patient inquiring about a service or information, please press 1. The next one says, if you're an existing patient and have any question about your account or need more information, please press 2. Now that's real simply because your call coming in for a new patient is routed to your call conversion expert, so you get better call conversion. The other one is routed to your scheduler. Whoever that person happens to be, they can either change an appointment, make an appointment, they can answer a question about account, insurance, or what have you. Now you've routed those two calls. Now, if you're a small office and you're just growing and you have 15, 20 patients a month, that isn't a problem for you. But go ahead, start growing, start getting 20, 30, 40, 50 patients a month and have that consistently. This then becomes a problem. And we're simply trying to channel the communication so they go to the right places in the office and you have higher call conversion for your marketing cost. The call conversion across the country is devastating because of the exact analysis that I'm talking about. They have to be able to get a call, keep a person on the phone, and the conversion, the dollars lost in a month's time and an annual basis is not in the tens of thousands. It's not in the 50s of thousands. It's in the hundreds of thousands. So this analysis is pretty critical as you grow. So back to the analysis that we originally did. I'll throw this back up on the screen. You'll remember there was 1,377 phone calls. We put this entire system in place, and 463 of them were existing or new consumers. What happened in the next 30 to 45 days? Well, the first thing that happened is that the office manager called me and said, I want to thank you for something. He says, the amount of confusion that left our front office, it took about 3 weeks for it to happen, is so unbelievable. The entire front office has calmed down. That happens in any office. Now, that's a larger office, and it has, I said 2.5 doctors, and it has 2.5 or 3 full-time hygienists. It's receiving between 60 to 70 new patients a month. So take that for your own office. You may not think this applies to a growing practice, but it actually does. You have fewer staff in a growing practice because of payroll and trying to keep payroll down. So the front office manager is usually not even a manager. She's a manager incognito because she's also being the treatment coordinator person. She's also being handling the finances of the office. She's also handling the phone calls coming in, and she's straightening out the reception room, and she's pulling charts, and she's doing reports. And whoa, she's getting a little bit confused here. So don't think as a small office you don't need this. When I say a small office, an office that's doing anywhere between $30,000, $40,000, $70,000 a month, I consider that a small to medium-sized office. So that being said, that analysis is pretty critical for you. It really begins to change the growth of the practice by lessening the confusion at the front desk. Your front office people will absolutely adore you, believe it or not. So let's take up the next lesson here. Before we do, the last thing I would say on this lesson is that the office, when it really grows and you have marketing occurring externally, your website, which I'll throw up on the screen here, can have a reference to phone numbers that they call. Now, what do I mean by that? You can have on your site, when it says contact, it can simply say new patients call this number, existing patients call this number. That routes your calls. Sort of fascinating. So it's another thing. It's real simple to do. As you grow, you can also implement that. A lot of your larger organizations or dental offices have already done this. They're already pretty sophisticated, and it eliminates a massive amount of confusion and allows the ceiling that is on the income to come off the top. And the amount of staff member confusion lessens, the office manager gets a little bit more sane, and you have a better environment to work in. So let's take up the next lesson, which is how do we handle the customer service that's coming in on this communication line. So the next thing is called customer service, and how do we increase or elevate our customer service when they walk in the door.